Hello and welcome to this Hymo Setups lap guide for week number 6 in the Falken Tyre Sports Car Challenge. We are here at the legendary Imola circuit. My name is William Chadwick and we're going to be driving the Porsche 718 GT4 car here on iRacing. You're going to watch a hot lap next, followed by a lap guide, and we'll go over how to get the most performance out of your car this week and extract those few tenths in order to beat your competition. So, you've just watched over the hot lap and it all happens very fast. And yeah, as you can notice, I think initial impressions you will see, there's a lot of curb usage around this track and it's very, very important. Massively important to use the track to the best of your capabilities around this Imola circuit. And there's a couple subtle little tricks that I employ across the course of a lap in order to set a good time. This Porsche is the fastest car this week. For the Falken Tyre Sports Car Challenge series, and we're going to be having a little look really at what it takes to go fast, and we're going to just talk about a few little characteristics and techniques and just kind of what to look out for in order to set a quicker lap time. The first sort of main objective that you do on the straight, and I always talk about this, it's a minor thing, but we're making that distance as short as possible. It's something a lot of people overlook because it's only worth a few hundredths of a second, but everything can matter in sim racing, and when it comes down to being a thousandth between pole position and second place, that could be the difference between winning the race and losing it. So I always stress the importance of just straight lining these sorts of areas of the track as much as possible, and a lot of it comes down to attention to detail. Having a really high attention to detail when lapping and when looking at a track and where to gain time is super important, and it's just the first sort of thing that I'd be thinking about when driving this 718 GT4. You can jump a little bit of this curb. I'm not convinced it's any faster in terms of a lap time perspective. It doesn't really gain you any time at all, but I do tend to do it just a little bit, just straight lining towards turn number 1. First thing that we look towards now is opening up the corner. We want to be braking in a fairly straight manner. It's not critical to be braking in a dead straight line. However, we want to be right to the edge of the track limits. Not utilizing track limits is a common, or the whole space of the track is a common shortfall for a lot of drivers. And yes, you will make mistakes when running up right close to the grass, but ultimately that is what helps you get as fast lap as possible. And as you'll see as we enter turn number 1, despite me straight lining the braking zone, that we start to brake roughly around about the 1 sign here, about 150 meters for the corner. This is what it looks like from the cockpit, transitioning onto the brake kind of as we're starting to cross this little yellow, orange fire marshal's post, and if we just edge it on bit, you see that I really start to jump on the brakes as we're passing the marshal's post on the right hand side. When we go down towards turn number 1, like I say, fairly straight braking. Don't be worried about getting an ABS. If you've come from GT3 cars and you've not drove a lot of GT4, you may be concerned that if you're hitting ABS too much, it'll be overheating the tyres. It's certainly something that has been present a lot in GT3 racing across the course of the last 1.5 years, on iRacing 2 years, maybe even more than that. But in a GT4 car, the way the tyre model is built, the way that its thermal management is required to be used, it's not as bad. The sensitivity just isn't there. You can slide the car, you can hit the ABS, and it's not gonna make your lap times go significantly slower. I've never really noticed any full sort of thermal degradation across the course of a stint in a GT4. The tyre is just way more robust than a GT3 car, so do not worry about hitting 100% braking. It is certainly the fastest way to go in heavy braking zones. Think Monza turn 1, into the last section here that we'll look at later in the lap, but any heavy braking zone, 100% is completely acceptable and is not going to make your tyres any worse for the rest of the lap. So, slightly straight lining in the braking zone. As I start to pitch the car in, I'm going to rotate off the brake to help ourselves turn in. You always tend to get a bit of a kick of oversteer at the start of this section. We're using maximum amount of track possible, and the only reason you're not touching the grass here is simply due to the camber in the tire. But yeah, you're maximizing your entry at the start of the track here, and as we go into turn number 1, first thing to do is aim for the second sort of anti-cut sausage curb. These curbs spring the car up into the air, and it definitely means that we get a bit of air time, but it's the quickest way to minimize and straight line this sort of chicane section as much as possible. So we jump this first one, keeping good power on at the time of doing it. Never do nothing is a common thing I'll always say. You want to be crossing over between brake and throttle pretty efficiently. In a sprint scenario where you're not needing to save any fuel, this sort of crossover that you see here where I'm blending both pedals is fine. If you're ever in an endurance perspective, even in a GT4 car, you want to clean that up a little bit, but still, never just coast and do nothing. It's something that I'll always say, and is very important to generate lap time. Jumping this first curb, you get a bit of a lift from the car. On this Hymo setup that we have attached to this vehicle, the dampers that I've done really help to deal with these curbs, and on stock dampers, it's going to be a lot harder for you, but it is massively crucial to set a good first sector. It's very easy to lose 2-3 tenths of a second just in this first sector, and this Porsche is excellent at taking these curbs this week with the dampers that we've put on the car. First curb, then again we're aiming for the second of the anti-cuts. This is a really important anti-cut, and especially important in something like Porsche Cup, even GT3 if you're driving the Porsche itself. Again, takes curbs really well around here on this circuit. We want to jump this curb. When we do this, it lifts the car up into the air, and we're able to actually skip third anti-cut. This just allows us to get a much tighter run through the corner, allowing us to carry more minimum speed and more speed in general through this entire section and sector 1. And if you look at that in real time, it looks pretty smooth the way the car lands, but you will take a lot of practice to get reasonably decent at that. Other things to note is you can get a slowdown here on this inside if you cut it a little bit too much. Essentially, as of most corners in this track, 4 wheels over the side of the curb at one point in time where all 4 wheels are fully past this red and white curbing will get you an off-track or a slowdown. Here it's especially important to kind of feel that out, but you do need to cut it a lot to get a slowdown. I wouldn't be too worried about cutting it a little bit and getting a slowdown. It is quite a large cut you need to get in. If we watch this from the cockpit perspective, we're cutting a lot of these curbs in this initial section. Moving on to turn number 3, 4, whatever they number it. Very small kink, but much more corner than you might think it would be, just generally due to the speed that we're carrying now at this section. Ideally, you don't want to cut any of this anti-cut curb. However, In order to do that and not slide the car throughout the majority of this corner, you do need to be positioned a little bit more to the right. So we use a little bit of this anti-cut just to settle the car, just to get a little bit more of an inside line. So we're not, one, running on the grass and losing time, as the grass does slow you down a little bit when you exit on it, and also not running off to get an off-track here. Of course, you have to run far off, but again, it's going to be positioning you closer to touching the gravel, closer to touching the grass, and losing time. So generally, don't worry about taking a bit of curb here. Try and minimize the anti-cut that you take here. It will allow you to go a little bit faster, as it just you don't get in any TC whatsoever, or electronic stability control, which is on this Porsche. Can't turn any of them off. So just be aware of that. And if you want to look at it from the cockpit, there you go. Here we go. So that's the end of section number 1. Done in fairly rapid time. And now we head into sector number 2. A very technical sector. Again, a lot about using curbs and using the track. You know, if we observe how much track I'm using again on the entry, it's to the extreme. But you have to be to the extreme in order to extract the maximum performance and the maximum lap time. You might not feel comfortable going this close to the edge, but definitely work up to it. In a practice session, don't just go into a qualifying session and go, right, I'm going to go up right to the limit, just like Will was doing. You will end up touching the grass and having a problem. A lot of it comes down to understanding the widths of your car that you're driving and a bit of practice, but massively important in order to extract maximum lap time. We're braking just after the 100 board, but generally here at this corner, braking performance is not key. You do not need to stop in the shortest time possible. You do not need to slow the car down as efficiently as possible. It is much more important to position the car well and to use the anti-cuts correctly without getting a slowdown or anything like this than it is to brake in the shortest amount of time. It is not always about braking in the shortest amount of time. A lot of the time it comes down to getting the car to rotate and also position correctly. So if we look in the cockpit, we're braking, like I say, around about the 100 meter board as it crosses, just about after, let's say about 80 or 90. I like to shift down before I enter these corners. Do it in the GT3s, I do it in the GT4s. I find that a higher RPM just allows the car to naturally rotate a little bit more. We have literally no diff settings that we can change on this GT4. So a higher gear will cause the car to rotate a little bit more on entries. Higher RPM, sorry, I should say lower gear, higher RPM will allow the car to rotate more on entry, and it's something I use in order to just carry a little bit more minimum speed. Again, here at this turn, you can get a slowdown on this entry curb from doing a similar thing. It's half a car here, so just be aware of that. You can see I was quite close to exceeding that half a car, but it's, you know, you'd need to be, let's say, 20-30 centimeters further inside, because it has to be all the half of the car over this inside curb, this red and white curb at once. Use the brake to trail in. Be very, very gentle on the trail off, just to rotate the car. Position the car well with a gear change down for this second section. We are very, very close to the left-hand side. Yes, you can gain time by going in harder here and positioning the car more towards the middle of the road. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not going to gain you time overall, because you're going to lose it in this right-hander. So we set ourselves up well for this right-hander despite the lack of long straight after it. And again, we commit the car fully on the brakes. Something I've always found helps me a lot is when I go over this anti-cut on the inside, whether it's in a GT3 car, a GT Cup car, a GT4 car, having throttle applied when you're driving over this curb stabilizes the car a lot. Can I tell you an exact reason for that? No. But what I do know is it works, and it is very, very crucial. If you're just coasting across this curb, the car will be more inclined to react in a negative manner. And super, super important to commit well to throttle. You see the pickup time that I have here between 0 and like 80-90% is really quick. And due to the way that these cars are not that powerful, I mean, still 400 horsepower plus is a lot, but picking the throttle up strong and aggressively is important to maximize lap time and the power you can carry out this corner. Here we've got a risk of track limits on the exit. It's all four wheels over the red and white curb. Just be aware of that. This is a perfectly acceptable amount of track limits used on the exit. You do want to be running up onto this curb, because if you're pulling the car more towards the inside, it will end up costing you in terms of a lap time perspective and also a little bit of a tyre perspective. I don't talk much about thermal degradation. It's not as important to never slide the car, never hit ABS, but it is still important not to just drift every corner. More drifting, sliding of the tyre will degrade the tyre's percentage and overall tread depth. You will reduce in grip by having less tread on the tyre, so it is important to minimize wear when possible, but it's not critical in terms of a per corner basis in terms of thermal management, but generally across the course of a half an hour race it is still important. As we go into the hairpin section, I find this very, very interesting corner. We're braking very late at the 50 board. Onto the brakes fairly hard, but not massively. We're going uphill, and we want to trail it in pretty well. I like to shift down to second and take a late apex. I find it really important to be late apexing into this corner. As you can see, we are actually apexing well past the midway point of the corner. And I just find this helps me straighten the car up for a good exit, allowing a lot of traction to the rear end. And I just find it is a quicker line for me. A general note for this corner is try and complete it in a smooth, controlled action. One turn in, not fighting, not stabbing at the wheel. One turn in, one turn out. Nice, smooth actions. And commit to the throttle aggressively, but do not, at any cost, touch this inside curb. If you were to touch this inside curb, and I have done it on plenty of laps, the car tips, you're overloading the right rear wants to give up on you because you're asking it for too much, essentially, because you're asking power, you're now putting more weight onto the right hand side of the car, and it just gives up, and you have traction control issues, or you're having half spins or something like this, and at the end of the day it'll cost you a lot of time, and you don't want to do that. So avoid the curb, straighten it out as much as possible, being aware that track limits again are all four wheels over the edge of the curb. You can see here that as soon as I've got the car turned and as soon as I'm committing to throttle, I open the steering up very quickly because I'm trying to allow as much traction towards these rear tyres as possible. If you look at it simply and start to speak a little bit about the traction circle, a tyre only has 100% of grip. It can be delivering power for you using 100% of the grip, not spinning wheels just about, or just on the edge of spinning wheels, or you can be turning. And ultimately, when we're racing, we're in a balance between that. You know, you've got half of it is turning and how much lateral force you're putting through the tyre, but then when you're asking to deliver power as well, you're also asking for more grip from that tyre. So you've got to be balancing it as close to that 100% as possible, and just be aware that when you straighten that steering up, you're requiring less turning from the rear tyres, from the front tyres, or the rear we're talking about when we're talking about power delivery, but that allows you to have more grip available, more traction, less likelihood of oversteering, less likelihood of overheating the tyres, wearing them too much, etc. Just generally giving you a better traction and an easier time out the corner. That completes sector number 2 as we head into sector number 3 of this beautiful Imola circuit. Up this hill, I tend to like to just come away from the side of the track a little bit just to see my line as I go over the top of this crest. Of course, we're going to be braking pretty much as soon as we top this crest. At the sort of 50 board, you will be crossing the 50 as you start to brake. I do shift up to 5th here. I did try holding 4th, but for me, it's not worth it. You do need to shift to 5th. Nice and hard onto the brakes, a very aggressive sort of peak onto the brakes. We're going to be using all the entry again. We want to trail it in nicely. I love to jump on this curb a little bit. You can use varying amounts of this curb if you like, but I do find that, you know, when we're using the third gear here, it's important just to grab a little bit of it. On the exit here, it is incredibly easy to get an off track, and with how aggressive you're being on the throttle and how much you're asking of the tyre to turn around the corner, you will be required to just manage that throttle a little bit. As you can see here, I'm applying a little bit of corrective lock and having a small comfort lift, which is not optimal for sure, but it's pretty close. Again, it's the same sort of thing. 4 wheels off will get you a off track. Just be aware of that. Again, we're pretty close here, but yeah, be aware of that. After you've exited this corner, I like to really tightly bring it across down this hill, just minimizing the distance a little bit as we pull it down into Acqua Minerale. Something I find extremely important here at Acqua Minerale is, again, it's not about braking efficiency. We can carry more speed, we can brake later into this corner and gain time. And sure, maybe on the best lap ever, you are more efficient into here than what I show here. However, in terms of a general consistency basis and a general idea, it is much more important to brake earlier here and less, and perfect your line and the amount of speed that you're actually carrying into the corner and through the corner, than optimizing your braking to an extreme perspective. If we look from the cockpit perspective, as we cross the 50, or just before we cross the 50 really, I'm starting to brake, but I'm only peaking at 40%, with then sort of like 20 through the mid corner as I jump a little bit of this inside curve just to give myself a slightly smoother line through the corner. And then back when I'm straightening it out a bit, peaking again about 40-50%. As I shift down to third gear, super easy here to actually run onto the grass, and I do be careful of that. I think it's very easy to do, and I did it on many of my laps when I was preparing this data pack. And yeah, just be careful of that. You do want to use, again, maximum amount of entry possible. However, when we think of this from a perspective of a race, bring yourself inside a little bit, especially when you're starting to learn the track, and gradually open it up to being more confident to hitting the grass a little bit, or being very close to it, because a tiny bit of grass is not going to send you off the track, but a tiny bit more than that will. So just be aware of that. A nice trail as we enter into this corner. We don't want any anti-cut here, and you will feel the urge to shift down to second gear. However, it, for me, is important just to keep it third. Second, you can shift here right to second. You're going slow enough, but you're going to have to change almost immediately after you exit the corner. And for me, it's you don't gain any time. When you factor in shift time and stuff like this, you gain nothing. So keep it in third. Just like nibble, graze this first bit of curb. Kind of close to that second anti-cut, but we do not want to jump it in any circumstance. It's just not the right sort of... there's too much elevation here, and also it's not the right sort of corner to do that. Third gear, aggressive on the throttle, because obviously we're reasonably low in RPM. And then we exit into this final section. Again, it's very easy to come off here and get a slowdown. If you go very wide, do get a slowdown, or an off track. An off track here is possible by just going 4 wheels over, as per usual. Generally, when I go onto this curb, I think it's important to... You feel like when you're on here, you might want to come back across, kind of aggressively get off the curb in the AstroTurf. Don't do that, just straight line it up that curb, and again, reduce a little bit of that distance, and just allow yourself to accelerate down towards the chicane. Sector number 4 here, the chicane sector, is incredibly challenging. The track limits here are way stricter than anywhere on the circuit, and there is a lot of time in this corner, and certainly something that is incredibly hard to perfect, especially in terms of a race perspective and a quali lap perspective, because you can imagine that coming into this section of the lap, you'd be like, oh, I hope I don't get an off track here, or I really don't want to get an off track, especially if you're on a good lap. It's important to practice this as much as possible, as it's a key area of the track that is quite challenging, let's say. Braking around about 75, between the 150. Hard on the brakes here initially. Edge of the car into the corner. As we trail off the brake, you can cut about like half a car over this corner. So if this half of the car here, you see we're just below the Hymo logo, if that is over this side of the red and white curb, you will get an off track. And the same goes for the second bit of this corner. I'm a little bit conservative here. There's definitely a little bit more in it. It's important to just allow the car to land nicely as you carry the minimum speeds through here. Through this second part of the corner, it's really important to get a nice run on the exit. So again, cutting not as much for me personally, as I find it slightly easy to manage. However, this is well within track limits. You know, it's half a car again, same sort of thing. as the first corner. Some great replay management from myself. But generally, as you go through this section, you want to just be aware of these track limits and practice them as much as possible in order to get consistent. On the exit, and after I've turned this corner, like you see this small movement here. In a matter of frames, I really open the steering up, and that's to give myself some more available grip to the rear tyres for traction. And again, understanding that the track limits here are 4 wheels over the red and white curbing. You get an off track if you go over that. Reasonably forgiving, but definitely easy to still get one, especially if you carry too much speed through the chicane or you're having a small moment on the landing. Sector number 4 is a very challenging sector, but we've navigated it and we're down to sector 5. A challenging sector, but relatively simple to understand. As we go under the bridge, I like to arc myself out a little bit more just so I can get a nice straight braking. And we brake when we just cross the 100-meter board from inside the cockpit. As you can see from your perspective here, crossing the 100 meters, this is when we start to really hit the brakes. And this is a downhill, hit the brakes pretty much as hard as possible. Really aggressive on the brakes here. Go straight into 100%. And we perform a lot of our peak braking in this moment of time. As you can see, I raise myself up onto the outside curb. This is because, well, one, Imola hasn't had the curb update, the 3D curb update yet. So if this is post the time that Imola has maybe had a 3D curb update, like you see at Mugello or a Sebring, Zano, for example, you might not be able to do this anymore. But because there's plenty of grip on the curb here, we open up into this curb as we're slowing the car down, and it just gives us, again, a wider radius to carry as much minimum speed as possible in this corner. I always find it important to slow the car down more and grab this first bit of inside sort of AstroTurf curb than to go really hot into the corner, carry loads of speed, but not actually grab this, because I feel like you massively lose out in the midsection here from being able to get onto the power and actually go through the corner and carry as much speed as possible. Final section here for generally the last corner of the, well, it is the last corner of the lap, the last true corner of the lap at least. Didn't used to be back in the day, but it is definitely now. Again, if you're basically touching the grass here, you will get an off track. It's the same sort of red and white curb, 4 wheels over rule that you have. You want to use this to open up the last corner of the lap. I like to keep it in 3rd gear here and jump onto the curb because for me, when you're going through this last corner, actually having the car raised a little bit helps to rotate the car as it's putting more pressure on that rear right, so the car naturally kind of wants to rotate a little bit more as you're approaching that 100% sort of grip limit of the right rear tyre. And as you jump onto this, it'll just help you complete that corner. And again, careful on the exit. This is a time loss on this lap. As you can see here, I'm just too loose and I get a bit of traction, and this is like 1/2 to 1/10 of a second time loss. Definitely stopped me from doing a 0.3 on this lap, and as you can see, 300ths lost to my best, but also I think I could have done a bit better than that in the final sector. Through this last corner, again, red and white curb, track limits, and then you're just shooting to the line. Unfortunately, this car has no DRS, so you can't use DRS in order to get a bit quicker towards the line. Again, shortening the distance as much as possible, especially in a qualifying lap. Again, I like to run as close to the inside here as possible because there's no detriment to doing so, and run it to the line. And that's a lap on race fuel in the Porsche 718 GT4 Cayman, whatever they call it these days. I hope you enjoyed the lap guide. It's something we'll try and do a bit more of here at Hymo, at least. I will definitely try and do some more lap guides across the weeks. I mainly cover GT4, but you might see me in some GT3 machinery or something like that. Maybe we can get some other engineers to contribute to doing some lap guides. But if you enjoyed it, it will massively help if you hit the like button, if you comment saying you enjoyed it or something that you'd like to see in the future improved, anything like this. Any criticism is more than welcome. And please do join our Discord. Link is in the description. If you'd like to drive on the setup that I drove here, you can do a single purchase for $3 on the Hymo website, the Track Titan Hymo section. or buy the subscription. Great value for money. You get like 50 setups a week across 4 different games, and it'll hopefully help you achieve a little bit better results, not putting yourself at a disadvantage to anyone who is running Hymo setups or their own custom setup that they've managed to develop really well. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're new to the channel, and until next week, see you next time.